So we continue looking at it from another prism now. As many as 750,000 pupils in South Africa have not returned to the classroom this year. That's about 500,000 more, 500,000 more than in pre-pandemic years. The United Nations Secretary General António Guterres has called the effects of the pandemic on learning a global generational catastrophe. In South Africa, latest Nids-Cram survey results suggest that as many as 750,000 children have not returned to school this year. At the start of the pandemic, international experts recommended the closing of a strategic response to reduce the viral spread. So we are to talk about this now with Servaas van der Berg, who is Professor of Economics at the University of Stellenbosch. A very good evening to you, and thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
So I'd imagine there are myriad reasons why we're talking of these large numbers, 750,000 pupils in South Africa that have not returned to the classroom this year. Tell us what the reasons are behind that.
Well, it appears that very many of them have lost confidence, have lost a picture, that in a sense they've lost hope in the school system. They're uncertain about the fact that things are not consistent. They're not sure that they're doing well. Many of them are struggling academically. And speaking of the academic struggles, those have been quite severe because of the very many school days that children have lost. So at this stage, we're talking on average of children having lost about a year, 3/4 of a year to a full year of schooling. And in addition to that, they've also been out of school for long periods. So there is also the question of forgetting. So to a large extent, our grade 4s are in fact now where they should have been in grade 3. And our grade 5s are in grade 4, at grade 4 level, and so forth. So a very severe problem altogether.
A worrying one indeed. And as I mentioned earlier, the figures are that this is 500,000 more than pre-pandemic times. So estimates from the third wave of the survey had indicated a recovery in school attendance in November 2020. I think this is a global picture here. But this comes as 1 in 10 households said that at least one school-age child had not returned to the classroom by April 2021. Just how bleak the pictures will, or the picture will be, given the fact that we have entered another lockdown period. We have new variants coming on to the battleground, so to speak. How bad is this for schooling and formal education in general?
Well, it's extremely severe in terms of its impact. The fortunate thing that has occurred now is, of course, that most teachers have been able to receive a jab of the vaccine. And that, of course, makes it more likely that the schools will be open and will remain open even if we have various forms of lockdown, if they're not too strict. And if we're not in as strong a period of infection as we currently have. So in that respect, one hopes that things improve. There's also something else that one has to remember, and that is that typically children in South Africa who drop out of school early, many of them do tend to come back. So there is hope that of those 500,000 more than usual that have dropped out of school, some will return once the school settles into its usual pattern again. So one hopes that can occur quickly, and that we can see also that children can be at school and learning and not be desperate about their futures.
So just looking at the analysis of the study that we've been talking about, the Nids study, it's a local and international evidence. I believe it remains clear that the largest risk to teachers is community transmission in line with infection peaks and not the opening of schools. But how does this impact the general teaching system?
I think teachers have been very worried about being in school, teaching, and because of fear of infection. And now that that is less of an issue, now that they have been vaccinated, that fear would be reduced. So one hopes that has an effect on their willingness to teach and even to teach during periods of lockdown. So I think, generally speaking, that part of we've made very good progress through the fact that we've vaccinated the teachers, and that is extremely helpful. But of course, there's still very much to do, because you have children that are now very far behind in compared to where they should be. And that places a very strong responsibility on teachers and parents and everybody to assist as much as we can to try to catch up some of what has been lost through the pandemic.
So the education system is obviously under strain at whatever level, primary, tertiary, primary. I'm wondering though, just are there any pluses? Are children learning any new skills in the midst of this, even though, you know, returning to a traditional timetable attendance is nowhere in the near future, because we keep grappling with, as we mentioned, new variants and then several waves that are still in the offing, we believe.
Yes, that's one of the big problems, is that the opportunity to learn, which is an important concept in education per se, that opportunity is now taken away from many children simply because they are not in circumstances where they can learn. Of course, that is less so for students, for learners who are in situations where they have access to the internet, particularly somewhat older ones who can do a lot of work on their own or can learn a lot. And you talk about the skills that they can get in other ways through the internet. But that only applies to about 9% of South African children who have relatively free access to the internet at any time. For others, there's bits and pieces, and the television and radio offers some opportunity to learn. And apart from that, there is, unfortunately also for very many of them, a situation where they often are alone, and alone in circumstances which are somewhat intimidating. Given that very many of them don't know what their future is going to hold. So that is also, we've seen very clear evidence that depressive symptoms are quite widespread in our population, and also amongst children.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. Servaas van der Berg is Professor of Economics at the University of Stellenbosch.